Welcome back, everybody. I am Jim Ingersoll, and you are listening to the Investor Success Podcast. All of our loyal success listeners, huge warm thank you. We greatly appreciate all of you, whether you're tuning in from iHeartRadio, YouTube, our own website, or the amazing iTunes, and whether you're out running around in your mobile university, aka your car, hopefully looking at some deals, or whether you're out there exercising your muscles or doing a little cardio, or maybe you're hanging out in the kitchen doing some dishes. It is nice to have you along for the show today. We've got a really cool show for you, and it's nice to have you back at Investor Success. We really appreciate everybody who's been out there leaving us little comments in YouTube, hitting our subscribe button, leaving us a like, or sharing our stuff in social media. It is super greatly appreciated. All the reviews that have been coming in through iTunes, thank you guys so much. By the way, I've got a free investing kit for you today. It's the, I call it my contracting swipe file. It'll allow you to set up contractors the right way so you get the right people onto your team and you control your rehab process. You can pick that up at bigmoneyinvestor.com/free gift. Write that down and grab it because it's a really awesome swipe file. A bunch of people have been grabbing it and sending me little emails and texts and things saying they love it. bigmoneyinvestor.com/free gift. Again, this podcast is for all of our loyal success listeners looking to invest in real estate the right way, focusing on creating net profit today via wholesaling and flips and long-term wealth and cash flow for the future, aka notes and rentals. We've got a really cool show for you today. I'm going to talk about removing some of the fear associated with investing. I'm going to tell you about how you can screen sellers, how you can actually get sellers to screen themselves so you don't waste your time. I'm going to talk about some negotiating tips and techniques, and I'm going to talk about closing deals today. Does that sound good? I see you all shaking your head. Yes, of course it sounds great, Jim. I'm going to share with you a specific roadmap on what you should do when you meet a motivated seller. Because if I'm sitting here in Richmond, Virginia, and I want to head out to Chicago to visit some friends, I don't just jump in my car and hope that I get there. You got to do a little bit of planning, right? There's this thing called a roadmap so that I know I get on Interstate 64 and head west. But where do I go after that? Where do I turn? It's nice to have a roadmap if you're going to go from Richmond to Chicago or Dallas or LA or wherever you're headed, right? So I'm going to share with you a roadmap on what you can do when you meet a seller so that you don't have to have anxiety, you don't have to worry. You've got to be able to solve the problem, and it all starts by focusing on them. And I'm going to share with you what we call the ANOT strategy today. It's going to give you 4 specific points so that you know how to control the meeting with a seller. It sets the expectation up front. It sets you up as the discount home buyer that you are and allows you to go out there and make some great deals. And hey, that's what this show is all about today. Screening your leads coming in, because you got big marketing funnels and your leads for sellers coming in. You want to screen those leads so that you get yourself connected with really desperate or motivated sellers that are really in an urgent need to sell, and you can help solve their problem. And then we're going to talk about some negotiating and really cool little things you can do so you don't have to worry and stress and have anxiety in that meeting, and it'll allow you to start closing more deals. Let me know how you like our podcast. You can email me anytime with questions, or if you got something you want me to cover in 2017, let me know. Jim@investingnownetwork.com. Thanks again for listening, and everybody, and enjoy today's show.
All right, screening sellers. All right, now what do you do when you meet the seller? Now this information on this slide I have never shared with anybody, but it works pretty well. I've been using it. I call it the ANOT, and I call it ANOT because I want you to remember it. In fact, what I would encourage you to do is write this down. This is the ANOT strategy, okay? This is 4 steps when you meet with a motivated seller. It's all about setting expectations for your meeting so that they have the ability to tell you freely about their house. Each of you has the ability to tell each other no, and it sets expectations from the very beginning. So you sort of go through this progress of ANOT, okay? A stands for we appreciate your time. All right, Mr. Seller, Mr. whatever your name is, Jones, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for meeting me at 2:30 this afternoon. It was really looking forward to meeting you. I want you to know that our appointment today is going to take close to an hour. Is that okay with you, Mr. Jones? You see how you set an expectation that this isn't going to be a 5-minute meeting, that you're going to walk in there, run through their house in 5 minutes, and then call them back later and make them an offer? You sort of set that expectation. Now, if you can do this in less than an hour, maybe you tell them 45 minutes. And so you just start off. You start with a really firm handshake. You look them square in the eyes. And you say, we really appreciate your time today. Our appointment today will last about an hour. Will that be okay with you? Is that an awkward way to start a discussion, or are you guys okay with that? Seems to work pretty well. It's not very awkward. So that's the A and ANOT. Okay? That's the A and ANOT. Now, the N is, all right, Mr. Jones, naturally as we go through this process for the next hour, you're going to have some questions. I'm going to have some questions. So I want to know right up front, is there something I can answer for you right now, right at the beginning of our meeting? So you tell them you appreciate their time. You set the expectation that it'll be kind of a lengthy meeting, maybe up to an hour, and ask them if it's okay with them. Then after a few minutes of building rapport, you say, naturally, and you're going to have some questions. Is there anything you have a question on right now? Typically, I find sellers, when I ask that question, they'll say something like, are you a cash buyer? Can you close fast? Do we need a realtor? Will you help me with closing expenses? Do I need to remove all the contents? Will you buy it as is? And those are sort of the questions I get when I say naturally, you're going to have some questions. And again, it sets the expectation with the seller in this process that it's okay to ask questions of each other. They can ask you questions, and by the way, you can also ask them questions. See, it's all about reciprocity. You're giving them something. You're giving them the right to ask you a question. Reciprocity is super, super important. The other thing you can do is when you go to these seller appointments is you could bring a little handout, a flyer about yourself, or if you want, I'll send you like not an ebook, but it's just like a discount home buyer's guide that sort of explains to the sellers what you do. That way you're leaving them something also, and it builds in that reciprocity that I'm talking about. Reciprocity is super powerful. That means if you give me something when I meet you, I'm going to feel obligated to give you something back later. You guys kind of see how that goes? Or Dan or Dean or Ed, Fred, Grant Davis. See, I bought Grant Davis lunch yesterday. And so now Grant is obligated to give me something back. You see how that worked? I'm just joking around with you on that one, Grant, because I told you I would let you buy lunch next time. But when you give something to somebody, they feel obligated to give you something in return. So look for little opportunities with your seller to give them something. It doesn't have to be something expensive. It could be something as simple as a booklet that sort of shows how you've helped other people. And you could put some testimonials in there, maybe from other buyers, sellers that you've worked with. That would be powerful. All right, so that's A, that's N. So we appreciate your time. Naturally, you're going to have some questions. The third one is O, obviously. O for obviously. You guys writing these down and remembering these? O is for obviously. Yes, Bill Cadman, credibility, very good. O is for obviously. Obviously, in order for me to make you an offer today, Mr. Jones, I need to ask you some questions. Is it okay for me to ask about the house, your financing, etc. today? Okay, so the N is naturally you're going to have questions. O is obviously, in order for me to make you a fair offer, I've got some questions. Is it okay for me to ask you questions? See how that reciprocity works? You gave them the right to ask you questions, And then they feel obligated with the obviously saying, in order for me to make you a fair offer, I've got to be able to ask you some questions. Is that okay? You're getting their permission to ask them about the house, the neighborhood, the financing that's in place, all these things, condition, family memories, anything you want. So naturally, you will have some questions, Mr. Seller, and obviously, I'm going to have some questions. Here's another powerful word in the O that I love to work on with sellers, fair. Everybody wants a fair offer. So I would recommend using the word fair when you're working with your sellers pretty often. Because if they think you're being fair, they're going to go a lot further with you. Now, you could be the judge of what fair is, of course. But being fair is super important. It's a very powerful word when you're working with sellers. So obviously, in order to make you a fair offer, I need to ask some questions, right? So that's the ANOT. The last one is T. Now, Mr. Seller, we typically have two outcomes. You may not like my offer, or even me for some reason. If that happens today, would you do me a favor and please just tell me no? And is it okay for me to tell you no for the same reasons? So again, this is reciprocity, and you're also setting expectation with a T. Typically, we have two outcomes. You might not like my offer. You might not like me for some reason. If that happens, can you do me a favor and just tell me so, or tell me no? Tell me no, you don't like my offer. That way, you set the expectation that it's okay to say no. And when you're negotiating and you're working with a motivated seller, you want them to be able to tell you no. It's okay. That creates a gap in your bidding or your offer, and you can close that gap and try to close the deal. But you've got to make people feel comfortable with telling you no. I do not like that offer. I can't let you buy my $100,000 house for $35,000 today. I just cannot do it. You've got to give them permission to tell you no. And so that's very, very powerful. And then in the same way, it's the other way. So is it okay for me to tell you no for the same reasons? So Mr. Seller, if I give you an offer you cannot take and you don't like, will you please tell me no? Yes, yeah, I'll tell you no, Jim. If I don't like your offer, I will be happy to tell you I don't like the offer. And then you say, well, on the other hand, is if I don't like your offer, do I have your permission to say no for the same reason? See, all this ANOT stuff sets the expectation for the entire meeting with the seller. Has anybody else ever used ANOT, by the way? Just curious. So we appreciate your time. Naturally, you're going to have some questions. Do you have any questions right now? Oh, for obviously, I want to be able to make you a fair offer. Emphasize the word fair. So I'm going to need to ask some questions today. Is it okay for me to ask about the house? And then T for typically. Typically, Mr. Seller, we've got two outcomes today. You may not like my offer. If that happens, can you tell me no? And if I don't like your offer, is it okay for me to tell you no for the same reason? Giving people the right to say no is very important. All of these are very important. Appreciate your time. That's a courtesy check, right? Naturally, we're going to have questions for each other, and then we set the expectation for two outcomes. The outcomes are either we're going to agree on this or we're not. Make sense? ANOT. Hope you guys remember that because it isn't something that many people teach about. I mentioned earlier about negotiating and closing and using this thing called mirroring. Daniel and I both joke back and forth that we're both a little bit of an introvert in small group settings. I could probably give a speech to 5,000 people and not be nervous, but I really don't like making small talk with people I've never met in my life. That's not my favorite thing to do. You gotta spend some time with me to get to know me before I'm really comfortable. So building rapport doesn't come natural for people like Daniel and I. So one of the things I do, besides bring my wife around who could along with me, because my wife's the opposite, she could talk to a doorknob for an hour. Okay, she could talk forever and with people she's never met. But if you're a little bit of an introvert, you can bring somebody with you who's an extrovert, like I do a lot of times with my wife, or you can use this technique called mirroring. This is mirroring again, because it will really help you a lot. So if we're talking and I start telling you a little bit about the history of the house or what happened or whatever, just repeat back those last 3 or 4 words, and if you can form them into a question, and you're going to gather a lot of information. When you're negotiating, you want to know what the other side knows that they don't want to tell you. You know, they don't want to tell you about the bad roof or about the heat pump that doesn't work or the time the neighbor kids broke in or like in a house I recently bought, the husband shot the wife, or a house I bought about 10 years ago where the tenant committed suicide. Those aren't the things that the seller really wants you to know. And there, in every house that you buy, there is stuff in the closet of the seller that they really don't want you to know. It could be nothing or it could be something. You never know. And the way that you get that out of them, and you can use that to your advantage when you're negotiating, is by building a really deep rapport, finding commonality, and if you struggle with this, try mirroring. Another thing I do, a house I bought a few months ago, the guy opened the door and he was in a Steelers jersey. Now, I'm not a Steelers fan, but instantly I knew he was an NFL fan, and so we started talking about football before we started talking about his house. And then that led into, I'm selling this house because I'm getting divorced, and we've lived here for 18 years. And so it broke down some barriers and makes it a little easier for me to relate to somebody on a non-real estate related topic. You can do this with pictures in living rooms. You see they like to, if they have kids playing soccer, or if they've been on a vacation to the Grand Canyon, or like Grant and I were talking about yesterday, going to Alaska. You could say, man, like Grant did with me, because I'm going to Alaska in September. Grant's like, man, you got to go to the mountain, you got to jump in the helicopter, you know. Whereas if you were at somebody's house and you were looking to buy it and you saw a picture of Denali, you could instantly, just like that, connect with them on that topic and build rapport and build trust. You've got to build trust into these relationships and into these meetings. So I'm just going to continue to give you like 4 or 5 more questions. And it's hard to remember all these questions. What I do is I put them into my notepad I put them into a notepad on my phone. And before I go in to see a seller, it's like my cheat sheet. Or if I need to, in the middle of it, I'll use their restroom and cheat again. You know what I mean? So I've always got my phone with me. I just put them on my notepad. So I put this ANOT thing, that's in my phone. This whole thing right here, every sentence of this is in my phone. So I don't have to memorize it. Here's a good question. Should we come to an agreement today, then we will then figure out the next steps to take together. Does that sound good to you? You're giving them permission and setting the expectation that you're going to come to a deal today. And then you say, does that sound good to you? That sort of makes it sound like it's the seller's idea to do the deal. You see that? And guys, keep in mind, my background is not sales, so all of this does not come naturally for me. My background is engineering and management and stuff like that. For those of you guys that know me, know that. This stuff is foreign for people that are engineering people like myself. But I do like questions. So another really important question when I'm meeting a seller is, what is causing you to sell? And why would you want to sell today? These are all good screening questions. You can do this on the phone with them. You can do it face-to-face. You can do it both times. What is causing you to sell? Why would you want to sell today? And Mr. Seller, how much do you think it costs each day you don't sell that vacant house? That one sort of rips in and twists the knife a little, don't you think? Because they may have told you earlier when you're doing mirroring and building rapport, the house has been vacant for 7 months. Over that 7 months, how much does it cost each day you don't sell? It's a powerful question. It gets expensive fast. They may or may not have the right kind of insurance for a vacant house. You could talk to them about that. What's going to happen if they don't sell? So you say, why would you want to sell today? And you could say, what's going to happen if you don't sell today? What's going to happen if you don't sell today? Then, of course, you get to the like I said earlier, what's the lowest price you can take for this property? It's an important question to ask. You might feel awkward asking it, but it's very powerful. If they're willing to answer that question, you're probably going to get a very good deal. Now, if they come back and say, well, I'm not really sure, I got to talk to my wife or something like that, like I said earlier in the screening session, I would say to Mr. Seller, you seem to have a range in mind. And then just go silent. You seem to have a range in mind, and then go silent. Silence, used correctly, is a powerful negotiating tactic. You got to know when to go quiet and when to do the talking. And I find the more I can keep the seller talking, the better I do. Mr. Seller, you seem to have a range in mind. And see if you can go silent after that and see if they'll give you one. Now, when he comes back and says, well, I was thinking $80,000 to $90,000. The house is worth about $100,000, so that's a good discount. And what I would say to that is, well, how am I supposed to do that? And then go silent. This is a really powerful question, guys. Really powerful question. How am I supposed to do that? It may sound like a dorky sort of question, but it works. It's effective. When they give you a range and the range is too high, just look at them and say, how am I supposed to do that? I use this question when negotiating stuff other than houses, and it also works. Okay, it works really well. Whether you're arguing with somebody at a hotel or whatever you're doing. I had to put a transmission into my 2013 Nissan Rogue, and it was just outside of warranty by about 7,000 miles, and they wanted me to pay more than I wanted to pay. I said, how am I supposed to do that? And it goes silent. And they came back to me with a lower price just by asking that question. When I negotiated to buy a new car earlier this year and the salesman gave me the price, I said the same thing. How am I supposed to do that? It's a good question. It works very, very well. All right, so that is screening. We started here with the 5-step seller survey. This is in the, I think I showed you, it's in the bank elimination blueprint right here under bonus material, bonus content, and you can find it right here. It's called the 5-step seller survey log. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Then we talked about ANOT. ANOT works. It's nice, you know, if I was going to drive from here in Richmond, Virginia and go down to West Palm Beach, say with Rich, I wouldn't just jump in my car and start heading south, though I know probably Interstate 95 would go there. But, you know, you want to have a roadmap of where you're going. And ANOT is a good way to build a roadmap in your seller meetings. ANOT. Have it ready. Appreciate your time. Naturally, you're going to have questions. Obviously, I want to make a fair offer, and typically we have 2 outcomes. Works very, very well. Some key negotiating questions. Again, what's the lowest price you'll take? You seem to have a range in mind, and how am I supposed to do that? Probing questions include what is causing you to sell today? Why would you want to sell today? How much do you think it costs if you don't sell?
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and social media contacts, and visit us online at www.bigmoneyinvestor.com.